Reddit, what's the craziest reason you had to fire someone? Reddit, what's the craziest reason you was a bartender/bar manager? This guy came in one night and said he was an aspiring DJ and asked if we would consider hiring him to come in just on Sunday nights to DJ for us. He said we wouldn't have to pay him at first, he would just take tips and we could renegotiate after. He helped to build up our Sunday night crowd. He lasted less than 3 months. He drove away so much business and I got so many complaints. He played the same songs every week, and when people made requests for commonly known songs, he had no idea who they, the musicians, were. I had to fire someone who was working for free. He was a nice guy, which is the only reason he lasted as long as he did. Had to fire someone? This is both sad and hilarious at the same time. Aspiring DJ. We all knew where this was going to go. Not my personal experience, but one fellow contractor had a safety guy for 6 months. One weekend he took a trip out of town for non-work related reasons, but used the company truck, and charged it all on the company credit card. On his way up there he ran a random person off the road, who just so happened to be one of the owners of another contractor who works closely with the one who employed this guy. Shortly after he was fired, and I'm sure criminal charges were being brought against him. A couple of weeks later his wife calls his former employer saying he had called her randomly and killed himself in his truck on the side of the highway. Me and another colleague went searching for records of this guy, couldn't find anything, no claims of a suicide in the local paper where he supposedly killed himself at. Thought it was weird, but whatever. It turns out this guy falsified all his qualifications and job experience. Fast forward a month later, and I heard through the grapevine that the original contractor who had employed this guy received a call from some contractor across country because he applied for work there and put them down as his previous employer. He faked his own death to get out of trouble with the company, then proceeded to put them down on his resume, not expecting anyone to check his references. Lowell. It astounds me how people in the construction industry don't think anyone knows anyone. Or that their reputation will in fact get around. Everyone knows everyone. He also sounds like someone I worked with previously who got fired for similar reasons, as well as being a racist, sexist jerk. It's one thing to not think your reputation will get around to other contractors, but to think that no one will call on your previous experience to find out what happened. Especially when you know your previous employer thinks you're dead. For one, it's just a terrible look. On top of that, since there were legal issues, you just let the people who are potentially going to charge you know you are still alive and potentially where you are located. Not a smart move. I was a florist and had a 40-something woman delivering for me. I received a call from the building manager of a brand new office building, with only one tenant, telling me my driver wrote on the elevator wall with a Sharpie. They had video showing that she was the only person to use the elevator during the time the vandalism took place. The worst part for me was, this happened a few days before Valentine's Day. Ouch. I did floral delivery for several years, so I truly understand this pain. In the late 90s, I was helping my wife who worked at a florist with VD deliveries. They used a local delivery service that a lot of local florists used, so had a lot of deliveries going out with them, but had also hired 8 people to deliver for the day themselves. Well, 9 if you include me. I was given the delivery list the night before and spent several hours mapping it out. I've always been a map geek, dividing up the routes and even putting them in MapQuest, one of the routing map software, and printing out turn-by-turn maps. This was of course before smartphones. I took the ones around the fringe. Was like 5 to 6 hours of drive time for me to take about a dozen deliveries. Most of the rest had 8 to 10 deliveries with an hour or less of drive time. I heard afterward that many of them threw my maps away unused and didn't deliver half of their deliveries. When I got back, they'd sent out a couple of employees to go deliver, and then I took nearly 20 more deliveries out and was out until 11 p.m. Although to be fair, this was a terrible chain. Their roses would usually last 4 to 5 days. All of their stuff was cheap and crappy. Lol. At a retail job, we had a kid come in and punch in for the day then go home. Would come back at quit-in time and punch out. We used separate attendance and pay software. We had someone punch into the pay software at 5 a.m., go home, come back and work his scheduled 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., and clock out at 10 p.m. Opening and closing crew weren't too familiar with each other, so he wasn't caught until Big Boss, who is normally a mid, came in early one day and saw him doing it. Wait, so instead of getting paid for his 5-hour shift, he was banking on no one noticing the AM/PM issue and getting paid for 17 hours a day? I'm a payroll person and that makes my head hurt. Yeah. He wasn't the brightest knife in the drawer, certainly not the sharpest flower in the garden. Fired a high schooler because his girlfriend kept showing up and they would disappear behind the racks. I told him his girlfriend was banned, trying to not fire him, and she kept sneaking back. Worked in an office and they hired a girl from a temp agency to help me. She wouldn't do anything unless I walked her through each step after telling her she had to do it. Hey, an estimate just arrived on the fax right next to you. Complete the quote and send it back. Come to find out, she was playing Spider and Solitaire on her computer. She was also sneaking out back and the warehouse guys thought she was doing drugs. I told my boss get rid of her. I would rather work alone than babysit her, so he called the temp agency and told them to stop sending her. She showed up the next day, so boss sent her home and called the agency saying, hey, she is useless, stop sending her. She showed up again the next day. This went on for over a week. The people at the temp agency said they told her to stop showing, but she kept coming in every morning, mind you usually 10 to 20 minutes late. My boss wouldn't say anything to her face, so finally I said, hey, we can't afford to pay you, so we had to let you go through the temp agency. They should have told you. She was all, oh, I thought they were joking. I was so glad she was gone. Imagine being so useless that working alone is literally easier. You'd be surprised. I had a coworker who we nicknamed -1, because when she showed up, she actively contributed less than nothing to the shift. She actively undid people's efforts to be useful. Had a coworker at a labor job, and when he called saying he would be out for over a month on an injury, I was ecstatic we got so much done that month. Years ago, at a lumber company, had a guy, less than 2 hours after he started on his first day, pick up his car with a forklift and stand underneath it to see what was rattling when he drove. Turned out it was his brain. His head wasn't screwed on tight. Dad, get off of Reddit. He got to use their equipment for free. I'm wondering if he got the job just to do that. I thought the same. Every part of me wants it be true. Absolute mad lad if so. Probably not though. I worked retail, and we had an employee that would hide and take naps inside racks of clothes. Somehow that wasn't the reason we fired her. We fired her for stealing clothes and then wearing them to work. Like, you can somewhat understand having a nap. Maybe she thought hide in plain sight with the clothes? Lady probably mastered the art of sleeping standing up and was going to pretend to be a mannequin. You mean she stood so incredibly still she turned invisible? And that's why she had to get fired for something else? She must have thought all her coworkers were T-Rexes. Not too crazy. More stupid than crazy. One of the programmers on my team was sitting at his desk looking at porn. And this is cubicle land. No offices. My director walked into the area to talk to me and saw it. Then it was the first thing he told me about, so I got up and walked over for a look myself, and there it was. Me and the director looked at each and I said, I gotta take care of this. So we walked back to HR, I told them what was going on and what we saw, and they told me to fire him. So I did. He lost a $110,000 job for looking at porn on his computer at work. If I look at porn, I want to whack one off. Work really isn't the place for it. Do people really watch porn just to watch it? Yes. I once knew someone who watched it all the time. To them it was just like YouTube. Once I had a guy call in sick to his restaurant/bar shift right before his shift and then proceeded to show up shit-faced drunk for happy hour during the time he was supposed to be working. He was not a bright man. Did he forget he called in sick? Probably. I once had my friend call in sick to not come into work for me. Problem was, he didn't work for me to begin with. I'm not an employer. He just called and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I had a stomach flu. I'm sorry, I can't come in today, I'm sorry. And I said, well, that's fine with me, but maybe you should call your work and tell them that. Also try not to sound so drunk. And he replied, I'm sorry, but I can't. And then he hung up. Had an employee that was going to get fired for simply showing up late constantly with no legit reason. During the term meeting she tells me another employee cut the brake lines in her car. It's obvious this was to save her from being fired. She didn't realize that something like that gets cops involved. She was termed, and then detectives showed up to her house to get statements. Of course, no evidence of lines being cut, and now she's dealing with police for making false statements. I had a driving job. They hired a new guy. He had a massive chip on his shoulder. I never could figure it out. Right from the start he was already on about how the company was mistreating him. Yeah, right. We were a charity. Super friendly people. A couple weeks go by, and I'm driving a truck, and I start losing brake power. I coast the truck off the main street into a parking lot and come to a stop. The guy never returned to work. Same job, a lady was hired. Apparently she was a part-time school bus driver too, so that was her in. This was years ago and she had some sort of earphone thing for her cell phone before anyone really did that kind of stuff. It was my job that day to be her sidekick and make sure she was driving alright. She was talking garbage to her family during driving with her little setup. Nothing important at all. She just had a bored family that would call her while she was working, and she'd talk with them instead of paying attention to the road. We got downtown and had a slim alley to pass through. She told me she could handle it. I told her to watch out for the other truck in the alley. She said she was okay. She goes down the alley, and scrapes both of the trucks. The other driver comes out, and lucky for her, was a nice guy. He just told her to be careful next time or something. After we do our pickup there, she yells at me, telling me it was my fault that she scraped the trucks, that I should have told her not to drive down the alley. She was gone the next week. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you have a similar story, share it in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe for more. Have a great day, or night.